Hello, welcome to Baltic World. My name is Crispin. Today I'm going to talk about the war in Ukraine, but in a slightly different way. I'm going to talk about what the war means to Russia, in particular its leadership. It's something I've been reflecting on a lot these past weeks. The narrative to date has been that Putin sees himself as the current Tsar, the inheritor of Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, and has the grandiose enterprise of restoring the Russian Empire to its largest extent. And it's a view that I definitely share, but it runs a little deeper than that. Let's say Putin was gone tomorrow. Would that mean that Russia would give up the fight? Some oligarchs would certainly like that because they're subject to sanctions, they're seeing their material possessions frozen, and see the war in Ukraine as a senseless undermining of their corrupt grift. However, I now feel as though this conflict is drilling itself ever deeper into the psyche of the Russian people, especially because of the failures of the Russian army in the opening days and weeks of the conflict, evolving as it is from a special operation to now a full-fledged national war. Understanding the way the Russians perceive this conflict, I think, is essential for not only understanding their will to fight and the sacrifices and burdens they're willing to endure, but most importantly, to understand how to achieve a total and complete victory over the Kremlin. I'll provide my analysis, but a couple of quick housekeeping things. First, I checked my analytics, and to this day, the vast majority of people who watch this channel are not subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. There is nothing more beneficial you can do because it lets the YouTube algorithm know that people are valuing this content and it shares it with many others as well. So please do so and thank you. Secondly, a few weeks ago, my patrons reached out expressing concern about Patreon. Patreon had just shut down some pro-Ukrainian fundraisers and they wanted an alternative and they suggested Contribui. If you don't know what Contribui is, that's okay. Neither did I. However, it turns out Contribui is a Patreon alternative based in Lithuania. It's a startup there, and the people who run it are interesting and wonderful. I've spoken to the staff directly. I've really enjoyed setting up an account with them. If you want to support the channel, do so there. I'll leave the Patreon for now, but please note I won't be adding any new content for Patreon. We will be doing some exciting things for those that support us on Contribui. Change over if you are on Patreon to Contribui for the most benefit out of the channel. And if you want to support us through Contribui, and you'll also be supporting Baltic business. Okay, so how is the war in Ukraine evolving from a Russian point of view? This is critical to understand because if the conflict is purely the failed delusions of one rogue leader, then it's not a national struggle for the Russian people. Indeed, the resolution would be to depose Putin, replace him with a bunch of oligarchs who will quickly make peace, hoping for sanctions relief. And everyone starts to rebuild Ukraine. Ukraine moves ever further to the west, and people get on with their lives. However, if this narrative changes from a Russian point of view to one of national identity, then it could reach the Russian soul such the burdens the people are willing to bear become very great, and the struggles continue for many years. Now, this analysis is a bit ahead of the curve. We're only seeing the beginnings of this, but I do see a danger of such a narrative taking hold. And ironically, much of this is accelerated because of Putin's failures in Ukraine. As Russia contemplates the loss of this war, the stakes and consequences become rather stark. Certainly, Ukraine will become part of the EU, potentially NATO. The Western periphery will be much more of a threat to Russia. We're already seeing a massive arms build-up in the east of NATO. And most importantly for the Russian psyche, its claim as the Slavic patron and hegemon would be shot to pieces. The multipolarity of the Slavic world would be conclusive. What do I mean by that? Many Russians, and certainly those in the Kremlin, don't just see their country as another nation state, but rather view it as a civilizational power. When Russians wax nostalgic about the Soviet Union and lament its collapse, they're not talking about the power and might of Russia, but rather the destruction of what they imagine as a pan-Slavic nation. The idea that all Slavs are under Moscow's guidance and that the destruction of the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire means that the Slavic people and their identity can be destroyed and lost. And while we might view this as absurd, it's necessary to understand the mindset, which rests on three pillars: Russia as the inheritors of Rome, Russia as custodians of the Orthodox faith, and Moscow as protector of all Slavs. So each in turn, Russia as the inheritors of Rome. Many people would say that Rome fell 4th of September 476 AD when the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was formally deposed by the Gothic Odovacer. This is not true. This was only the Western Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered at Constantinople, lasted for another 1,000 years. The Eastern Empire evolved into the Middle Ages as a Greek-speaking kingdom we now call Byzantium. Critical to know, they never referred to themselves as such, and right through they called themselves Roman. For hundreds of years, Constantinople remained an important center of a united Christian world, but then, of course, there was a schism where the Pope in Rome became leader of the Catholic faith, and the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Emperor led the Orthodox Church. The first ever mention of the Slavic peoples is by the Byzantine historian Procopius, writing in the 6th century AD, describing a group of people who were under the authority of the Avars living in an area of modern-day Bulgaria. These people eventually rose up against the Avars and became a kingdom in their own right. Eventually, the Grand Prince of Kiev, Vladimir, converted to Orthodox Christianity, from whence it spread right through the Russian lands, wherein the Russian principalities became the most powerful Orthodox kingdoms after Byzantium itself. When Constantinople fell, 29 May 1453, the Russian principalities, particularly Moscow, claimed to be the true inheritors of Rome. Indeed, the word Tsar, Caesar, Basileus means the leader of the Roman Empire. The second pillar, religion, clearly relating to all of this, with the Patriarch of Moscow claiming to be the rightful inheritor of the Patriarch of Constantinople, thereby adopting a leadership role in the Orthodox faith. This brings me to the third pillar, Moscow is the protector of all Slavs. Now, I mentioned the Rus were not initially Slavic. However, they rapidly adopted Slavic identity and culture, and in particular, language. If there is one pan-Slavic thing that unites them all, is a proto-Slavic language, an Indo-European language, an early language that does have linguistic similarity across all the Slavic nations. Certainly today, Russia is the country with the largest Slavic population. Around half of all Slavic peoples reside in Russia. So from just a sheer size and weight point of view, the leaders in Moscow perceive themselves as the natural hegemons of the Slavic peoples. Weaving this together, you'll apprehend my argument, which is that even if the Russians blamed Putin for all of the failures to date, the loss of Ukraine to the West could be too much for many Russians. Ukraine hits the trifecta. It's Slavic, it's Orthodox, and of all the countries other than Russia itself, because of the history, Kiev has the strongest claim to being a center of Slavic national identity. Now, this idea of Russia as a pan-Slavic protector can be quite myopic, and I'll finish this video with a couple of quick examples. There's a professor of international relations that I know based in Vladivostok, a staunchly nationalist Russian, who painted a very rosy picture pre-war of Russia's prospects invading Ukraine. He said that the Ukrainians wouldn't fight because of the median age being older, younger Ukrainians not caring about this stuff, but also said that because it's Slavs dying, the West won't care. The West doesn't care about Slavic lives. They won't put in major sanctions. There'll be no unity. There won't be major support for the Ukrainians, and thus it'll be a walkover. This idea, common in Russia, that Slavic peoples are somehow lesser to people in the West, is entirely perverse and wrong. Indeed, those that treated Slavic lives as the most expendable have been the Russian leadership. And we're seeing this today as the Russian leadership are killing the people in Ukraine. That's my view. I'm happy to take questions and comments. Please leave them down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.